It's Monday the 10th. We still got some sun. The weather is supposed to get very poor. Of course, we've got the moon. And what I'm doing is I am playing with ASI Studio using 150 ED, which I call Eddie. Got the laptop out here. What I've been playing with is doing mechanical adjustments to the azimuth and to the declination, with the idea that, of course, the way I used to do it through the eyepiece on a 6-inch Maxitop was to watch the drift over time, and if the drift headed off in weird directions, just make slight adjustments. So what you're seeing there is the moon, a much better view of the moon that I got last night using ASIair. It's now Sunday night, 9th of March. At almost 7:15, as you can see on the screen, you're seeing the moon. It's not perfectly centered. I've been doing some azimuth and declination adjustments. Oops, auto reconnect, because we are working over ASIair, and sometimes you lose connections. This is ASI Studio, far superior in terms of image quality and control. You'll notice I had the moon set up so that this gap was equal on both sides, but it's drifting to the left, and that usually suggests a bit of a declination error. So I'm going to adjust declination and center it up once again. So that is our view of the moon. We're getting about a 30-degree field. You can see part of it is missing. Now I got to do some more focal adjustments. Here is, once again, ASIair strikes again. We're about 30 feet away from the scope that is showing us this image. Using the planetary imaging with a gain of 50, or exposure time of 50 milliseconds, and a gain of 0. So we're not adding any additional sensitivity to the CCD imager. There's no way of adjusting the histogram that I can tell. Best way to set it up, just play with the adjustments here on the screen. Peak there. Yeah, we are definitely out of focus. And let's go take a look at the other view of the moon using a different scope. Okay, here we are seeing another overbright view of the moon. I have to adjust the brightness. We are looking through the Rev 2 system. Run the brightness down so we get some sharpness. Almost, but not quite, getting almost 30-degree field on the screen. Wow, I'm going to have to play with camera settings to deal with this, but this is just an experiment, so don't be too concerned about image quality. The color green in the moon is due to the fact that I'm using a dark sky filter. So there is our view. If I adjust the scope a little bit, I should almost be able to put the entire moon on the Revolution 2 screen. Now, what I'm going to do is watch it drift over time. I'll turn the camera back on, but look how clear and sharp it is compared to the ASI Air image I was getting last night, which I've included in this video. Now I'm going to back up and show you which scope you are now looking through. Backing up, and guess what? It's El Quattro. I've mounted the Rev 2 on El Quattro because it's naturally an f4. There is no need to be using any kind of focal reducer or 0.5 Barlow because it's operating at f4. And we are getting almost a 30-degree view of the moon. I have to do some mechanical tracking adjustments now on this scope as well. So all I've got right now is the moon. Oh, I just bumped my head against the scope, but it recovered nicely. All I've got right now is the moon, although I haven't been able to do any kind of alignment. So what I'm doing is just alignments to the moon, and I'm going to go to Jupiter next after I open up this, and we've had a chance to do the azimuth and the declinations adjustments for a while. Let's take a look at the other scope. here is, you're not quite seeing, yeah, you are seeing Eddie. Eddie has the imaging system that used to be on the smaller scope. Alright, and it is connected to the ASIair transmitter, which is occasionally losing contact with the laptop, which is located inside the house. Well, it's about 2 minutes later. I've opened up the south access portal to the backyard observatory, Penty, what I call a roof try, and I've readjusted the moon to its position. I've also done an alignment using the moon, which is not a good idea for doing any kind of modeling, but it's an experiment, and let's see what we got if we go to Jupiter. I have been making some adjustments, you might not be able to see, to both declination and azimuth to see if I can keep the moon tracking at the center of the screen, and I will do a similar kind of adjustment with the El Quattro on its portable mount, which you can see over next to the garage. Okay, what I've done here instead of Jupiter is I've gone to Mars because Jupiter is too far progressed to the west. And I changed the exposure time and the gain. We're starting to see a little bit of Mars right there. It's not quite centered on the screen. One of the things I really like about ASI Studio is the fact that you can do some great zooming once you center something up. So let me go ahead and do a bit of centering on this. I just love the Lost Man D. So intelligent. Of course, I cut my teeth on the Lost Man D as a go-to mount, which is probably why I'm going to go ahead and just do another align on Mars right now, just for the heck of it, as well as the moon. Let's see how this all turns out. So we are now using the ZWO imaging system on the f8 scope without any kind of focal reduction and getting a 30-degree field of view, roughly, a little bit more perhaps on Eddie. And we are getting almost a 30-degree field using the Rev 2 system because we are functioning at f4. So that is my tale of two scopes. I am going to make some adjustments to both azimuth and declination and see if I can keep the moon tracking. And as you can see, it is a very overcasty sky overhead. One of the things you have to be very careful of is when you're using ASI Studio, you've got a cable. You see that? You see that cable? It's about 6 feet long, but you have to really be careful about where it ends up. Another fantastic feature of ASI Studio is incredible amount of zoomage. I'm at about 300% right now, which is 5 times 3 is 15 times 40. Yeah, this is way beyond. 15 times 40, 400, 600x, so forget that. Let's go back a little bit until we sharpen up the image. We're only using a 150 millimeter. We probably will not get a particularly good view. Mars is very small right now. It's probably somewhere around 10 arc seconds. But that's a pretty good view of how much you can play with the image. I'm going to back off on the brightness just a little bit, maybe do a little more zoom in. Let's see if we get any kind of features. Now I could play with the focus a little bit more, but I thought I had it pretty sharp on the moon. I did lock it down, so it's going to screw around if I release the lock and start playing with the focus. Look at that, jumping around on the screen. No, not surprising at all. Okay, I'm going to go a little inside focus. That didn't seem to help. Sorry, that should be inside focus. No, outside focus. Now we're not going to get any features on Mars. Although the system The scope itself has a 0.8 arc seconds resolution under perfectly still skies, and the ASI Studio with the CCD imager I'm using, which is 308 by 308 pixels. The ZWO imager has a capacity to resolve down to 0.5 arc seconds, if you'll believe it. What you are seeing here is an image of the moon, which centered up quite nicely, actually, as far as I could tell, as it appears at 300%. Now we're going to scope it backwards, which I estimated to be 600x. And notice it's walking a little bit on the screen. Any vibrations are translated because we're at very high exposure times. Now we're going to go down to about 200%, which I estimate as being 10 times 40 or 400x. Not a particularly good night sky. Let's go back to 100%, which I estimate as being 5 times 20. That's 5 times, 200x. So this is a 200x view, and we're finally starting to get something that looks reasonably sharp. And I could spend a little more time focusing on it, but let's drop back to the point where we can get the entire moon framed once again. And you'll notice it's drifted. Some of the driftage is due to the moon's actual orbit around the Earth, but most of it is basically due to the fact that either the scope's resolution in terms of its steppers is not precise, or B, there's some mechanical adjustments. So I'm going to just favor the mechanical adjustments right now. So what I did here is just make a very slight adjustment of the azimuth. And look where the moon turns out. Look how sharp it is. And once again, let's go ahead and check what our percentage is of gain. Still sharp. Go back to what we were at, which was 40%, which basically on this f8 scope is about 150x. I should correct my previous numbers. We're now operating at f8, which means on the other scope we were getting about 40x at f4, so that's 80x. So wow. So this baby right now is operating at 20% at about 80x magnification, and when we go to 100%, we're basically multiplying that 5 times over. That is a very sharp view of the moon. I like its position on this screen. Here we're back at Mars again at the same magnification we just saw the moon at, which is, I believe, was 100%. Let's drop it down, just take a look. Nope, it was at 40%, so twice the 75x, 80x I expect, or about 160. Boy, that is very stellar. Let's go ahead and now we're going to flip the scope. I got to watch the cable, and I got to avoid anything mechanical going wrong as we flip over to have a look at Jupiter. Okay, I pole flipped to Jupiter by first telling it to go to Venus, then interrupting it, and I watched the cable. There's plenty of extension in the cable. You just have to be careful about routing it. This is Jupiter. You can barely see a couple of belts. I might be able to sharpen it up by reducing the gain. Well, let's try sharpening it this way. Yeah, the belts are getting a little more distinct. Let's try a little more gain. Now that gain doesn't help us. And it's not very bright, so let's push it up. And it starts to overpower the belts. Now, I'll run it back just a little bit. I'll leave it at 50, and let's zoom it in. Let's do it. Okay, 50%. Well, the belts are more distinct. And remember, one of my theses about the ZWO system is it gains in resolution and light gathering as you zoom. Certainly becoming more distinct. We're up to 100%. 20 times 5 times 70 is about 350 to 400x view of Jupiter right now. We're not seeing the Galileans primarily because we're setting up the gain and sensitivities just to get the best view of Jupiter, which usually means you lose the Galileans. Let's go to 200. Well, the belts certainly become much more distinct. However, the limb is very diffuse, which means, and the sky is just not stable enough to give us a view of any of the intra-equatorial belts, festoons and things you ordinarily see around the equator. Nor are we might be making out one of the thin line northern belts. Not a bad view. I got to see if I can get this thing to collapse once again. Our best view is probably somewhere around 150%. 2 and 150 goes 7 times. 7 times 80x is 500x. That's kind of hard to believe with a 150 millimeter scope that we would get a 500x view of Jupiter that actually optimizes its presentation. But so it is with charge coupled device imaging, especially the ZWO, which uses a cooling system to give the greatest stability to the CCD imaging pixels. So there's that view. Okay, well, I've got to start thinking of something else, or maybe we're going to wait for the sky to get dark. However, there are high thin clouds, but it would be nice to see something deep sky later on in the evening. So for the time being, well, still daylight to some degree. Carpe diem.